Hello again, fellow Mystery Files. In this video, I am continuing on with my ranking of all 33 Ellery Queen novels. This is part 2 of 3 and covers the middle part of the list. As always, there may be spoilers ahead, but I will try to keep them to a minimum. Let's get started with number 22, and a book that had me very conflicted, and that is The Last Woman in His Life. And I didn't really know what to do with this book that deals heavily with homosexuality and gay lifestyles. And while I think the overall message is supposed to be positive, the portrayal of Ellery's closeted gay friend Al Marsh is very problematic. There are a lot of clues indicating that he is gay, and many of them are just stale tropes often presented in a joking manner. For instance, he seems very freaked out when he learns that Ellery has had an affair with a woman, and we know Ellery has affairs all the time with women, and Al is apparently a close friend, so this is something that's a little awkward. Now, I do think the revelation that Al is gay is an interesting and unexpected twist for a novel published in 1970, but I think it's counterintuitive to the overall point the cousins are trying to make here. This book was written shortly after the Stonewall riots and is meant to invoke sympathy and understanding for the gay community, but the murderer is Al, who kills a man after confessing his love for him and is rejected, and this is very bad. It connects the gay community with deviant behavior, and they are typically associated with, and this is a stigma they're trying to move away from. So this is a counterintuitive point. Now, I do think the mystery plot is very good here. I think the clues are strong. I think the characters are well developed, but that is out of this context of this unsettling portrayal, and I just couldn't put The Last Woman in His Life any higher than here at number 22. At number 21, I have a novel that I do like, but I think there's a few things wrong with it that make me put it this low on the list, and that is Double Double. And this is one of those nursery rhyme murders we sometimes see in the Golden Age, where the murder plot follows a nursery rhyme. We see this a lot more from like the likes of Agatha Christie, and a few times from the cousins, and I think this is their worst one. There are a lot of murders in this book, and they follow the rhyme rich man, poor man, beggar man, thief. And I think the major issue with this novel is that it gets a little carried away. I think in general, nursery rhyme murders are a bit ridiculous, and the authors often have to stretch a lot to make it work. And I feel that way here. It also feels like the cousins get a little kill happy for no reason, where I get the sense they just wanted a book with a high body count. People are dying left and right, and it's a bit chaotic and too much murder. The story feels very disorganized and unfocused, but it's a very enjoyable read otherwise. It never really slogs and holds my attention from start to finish, and the solution is pretty clever, I have to admit that. Overall, this is a great novel, but it has some issues, so I placed it here at number 21. In 20th place is a novel that I almost never think about. In the grand scheme of Ellery Queen novels, I probably am the least familiar with this book, and that is The Scarlet Letters. And I think this book is fine. It doesn't stand out in my mind, which to me means that it doesn't ever sparkle either. The story here is good. Ellery's friend Dirk Lawrence is in an unhappy marriage to his wife Martha, and Ellery gets involved in trying to help them, which concludes with Dirk punching Ellery in the face. And I'm always up for a good Ellery punching. Ellery can get very conceited and deserves to be smacked down every now and then. Dirk is eventually accused of murdering Martha and her lover and goes on trial, and Ellery tries to save the day, and naturally, he solves the murder. And there is some fun hijinks in this. This is a rare book that Nikki Porter is in, who I think is criminally underutilized in the series. I think the solution is a little obvious, but the character work is very good. The main love triangle is very well developed, but I think there's a better love triangle of sorts in another Queen novel that we'll talk about in the next video. I don't have much to say about this book, so I have it here at number 20. From this point forward, I think we're into the novels that I would classify as good. The first of these is at number 19, and that is The Four of Hearts. And this is one of those ones where Ellery is in Hollywood, and this was never my favorite era of Queen novels, but I do think this one is very intriguing. In many ways, it is the story of a classic Hollywood romance between two big name actors who love, feud, and love again. Blythe Stewart and Jack Royal marry, only for both of them to somehow die while alone in an airplane on their way to their honeymoon. And this is one of the more ridiculous and convoluted plots, and that is really saying something for an Ellery Queen novel, but the cousins actually make it work here. I can actually believe the murderer committed this crime in the way that is spelled out here, which isn't always the case in a Queen novel. This is also the first novel chronologically with a sort of reduced denouement. I'm typically a fan of these long endings. As you can tell, the name of my channel is Summation Gathering, but Queen novels tend to have overly tedious explanations, and this one is much shorter and succinct, which I appreciate. The Four of Hearts is an excellent novel, but there are so many better Queen books, so I place it here at number 19. At number 18, I have another Ellery in California novel, The Origin of Evil. And for me, this book is interchangeable with The Four of Hearts as they have very similar pros and cons. I think the overall murder plot in The Origin of Evil is fantastic, but I also think it is overly convoluted. What puts it above The Four of Hearts is the exploration of human nature in this novel, where Ellery really explores what makes a murderer a murderer. I think there are a lot of fascinating ideas here regarding evolution and the human thought process, although perhaps maybe some of them haven't aged too well. I think the characters are brilliantly devious. I always love a good old-fashioned cruel murderer in a golden age mystery. I do think the meaning of these unusual gifts the victim receives is a bit cryptic, but not really more so than so many others in the series. The gifts, when taken as a whole, refer to the classification of animals and other species and relates back to Darwin. I understand it, and I think it's clever, but realistic is, I don't know, it's a little iffy. There's also some uncomfortable commentary from Ellery about women's sexuality, where he comes across as very chauvinistic to this one female character, even though she basically leaves the same lifestyle he does, but he's a man, so he thinks that's okay. And he's kind of an ass throughout. Otherwise, I might have put this one higher on the list, but it's here at number 18. At number 17, I have one of two novels where the inspector is the star, The House of Brass, which is the second chronologically. And I really like Inspector Queen as a character, although he does have some unsavory bits about him, particular earlier on in the series. I do enjoy this two-book story arc, which really seems to be its own separate canon, separate from the other Ellery Queen books, but it's not entirely clear, of his courtship and marriage to Jessie. But I do feel the other book is just simply better in every way. Although the mystery here is clever, Jessie is mistaken for a person with the same name and winds up possibly inheriting a lot of money. She and the inspector go to the titular House of Brass with the other heirs, and someone is murdered. I think the sort of treasure plot here is very clever. It has a fantastic solution that I will not spoil, and I do think some of the characters, really most of them, are kind of flat. Even Inspector Queen and Jessie aren't particularly vivid, certainly not as vivid as they were in their first appearance together. I think The House of Brands is a good novel, but not fantastic, so I place it here at number 17. At number 16, we have the first of the nationality titles that I actually enjoy, and that is The Greek Coffin Mystery. And what I love about this novel is that it is really the first one chronologically where Ellery seems human. He is called upon to find a missing will and suggests the will can only be in the dead man's coffin, only when he's exhumed, it isn't there. And I love when Ellery is wrong because we get a very good mystery plot afterward with Ellery desperate to right his errors. I also like seeing him be knocked down a peg. Instead of the will, however, the queens find another dead body. And I find the mechanics of this murder plot to be fantastic. It's really the first book on this list where I think we have an elevated murder plot. The clues are so ingenious, and we don't have any really cryptic dying remarks or anything like that. I do think part of the murder itself is a little unbelievable, where we're supposed to believe that one person was able to carry a large dead body around from several places without being caught. But that's the kind of thing I can pass over slightly in a mystery novel, where I don't want to sacrifice the good puzzle for the sake of reality all the time. I think there are parts of this book that drag a bit, which is why I don't have it higher on the list, but this is a fantastic novel, so I have it here at number 16. At number 15, I place the very last Ellery Queen full length novel, A Fine and Private Place. And I was conflicted over this one. I think the mystery itself is a little simple and obvious. In particular, the person being framed is obviously being framed, yet Ellery falls for it somehow. But for me, this book is very enjoyable otherwise. It reads very smoothly and doesn't drag you down at any point. I enjoy and like this book more than any I've talked about already, but I do think some of those other works, like The Greek Coffin Mystery, contain better mysteries. I also would have liked to have seen more of a fitting end to the Ellery Queen series, but this novel also heavily rounds the number 9, which is my favorite number, which is sort of a superficial reason to like this book, but it works for me. This is the last novel, and it doesn't really feel like we get a conclusion to Ellery Queen himself, which I would have liked to seen. So I placed this one at number 15. At number 14 is a similar book, in my opinion, and that is Face to Face. And this book hinges on a cryptic dying clue, but in this case, I actually don't mind it. It is very clever and one of the more believable dying words in a mystery novel. The murdered singer leaves behind the word face written down, and this is clever because we were led to believe she means the word face, but we are also shown and told that the letters have spaces between them, indicating notes on the musical staff. The cousins also do some brilliant obfuscation work here where there's a very obvious suspect, but it also seems like we're in a situation where the twist is the most obvious person did it, which is only somewhat true here. That person is involved in the murder, but it's not the physical culprit. I was quite surprised at the ending of this book. I often don't find myself being tricked by the author in this sort of manner, but I was tricked here. I've read so many mystery novels, I can pretty much see which trick is coming at you, but here I was deceived, I will admit. We also have some British elements creeping in here with Inspector Burke of Scotland Yard making an appearance. I always love when American mystery feels British. Face to Face is quite the genius novel that belongs in the top half of the list here at number 14. At number 13, I have the earliest book left on the board, and that is The French Powder Mystery. And I really enjoyed this novel, even though it does have some issues, mainly Ellery's blatant sexism and the overall racist comments in the narration. At one point, there is a African American building manager who is never given a name and just referred to simply as a certain word that I will not repeat. But this is the first time where I feel like Ellery's deduction skills, minus the chauvinism, are fully shown. He creates this list of traits where the murderer must possess, and that is how he narrows the field. Although I do disagree with how he constructs the list, I do find the mechanics of this book to be superior to any thus far. I love the discovery of the murder where Mrs. French just falls out of the trundle bed during an exhibition of the furniture, and the circumstances of her death indicate this murder is not even possible to pull off, yet it happened. And I think Ellery Queen is the sort of master of the impossible crime and solving them. This is one of those books where the solution is incredibly obvious once you're on the other side of it. The reason why I don't have it higher on the list is because I do think it gets very technical at times, like when Ellery goes into detail about the powder on the book stands and how the secret drug ring operates from within the department store. It's also those, chauvinistic and racist comments, although they're not as bad as many of the other novels in the series. They do bring it down a bit and it gets slightly tedious at times, but not a complete slog, so I have it here at number 13. And now for number 12, the final book I will cover in this video, I have the other Inspector Queen centric novel, Inspector Queen's Own Case. Now, I think The House of Brass has a better mystery at its core, but I think this book is just much better written. I love the characterization of Inspector Queen, who is now old and has reached the age of forced retirement from the police department, and he is very despondent about this because he's still very capable and active, and now he feels useless. He meets Jessie, who would later become his wife, and I do like this romance between older people, as we rarely see this dynamic in a traditional mystery novel. Jessie is a nanny to a baby boy who is the murder victim of this novel, and I think this is handled very well. We rarely see a child murderer in a traditional mystery novel, and here we have a baby as the victim, and naturally, the baby is more of a symbol than an actual character. I think this book is very well written, but I do think the mystery is sort of lacking. The solution is incredibly obvious, but the point of the novel is the characters, so I can excuse that somewhat in what is a really fantastic book here at number 12. And that concludes this video. Next week, I will finish up my Ellery Queen rankings with the top 11 novels. If you want to keep up to date with the channel, make sure you subscribe and like this video or leave a comment below. Until next time, Mystery Files.